your value is more than the markets. It's more than your acres and more than your livestock and more than your bank account. We are humans too. We are community members, we're volunteers, we're creative, we're problem solvers. There's so much to us. When a family friend of ours passed away to suicide, it was a real eye-opener for us. When we were in line at the visitation, people said, what happened? What was it that caused this? And as a former counselor, I knew that it wasn't one thing. Suicide doesn't start at the end there. There's one thing that causes it. That's not how it works. It's a culmination of things. It starts as stress and it continues as excruciating and chronic stress or depression or anxiety, and it just builds. We had a new baby and a not even 2-year-old at the time, and we really took that opportunity to look in the mirror and say, we're experiencing a lot of stress right now, too much stress right now, to the point where it's becoming out of control, and we probably need to do something about it. That was the time for us that we really made the decision to start talking more, start getting some professional help, which is really hard to do. It's really hard to rip that Band-Aid. But in doing so and making some major changes in our own home, we know that our outcome was well worth that time and those efforts, because we know that we were going down a path that wasn't going to be good.
As a farmer and rancher in North Carolina, I know firsthand the stresses and the struggles that come with this way of life. I've seen it affect good friends, and I've lost good friends. I don't want to lose anyone else. It's time to end the stigma around mental health. And we can only do that when we come together and we keep spreading the message that it's okay to not be okay.
The stigma in rural communities is really troublesome because what it does is it keeps us isolated. It keeps us quiet. We don't want to talk about the stresses that we're having or the struggles that we're having because it makes us seem weak or embarrassed. And when we do that, we don't share that with each other. We don't realize that other people are going through some of the same things that we're going through. So then that really puts up a wall between people who need to get help and their willingness to go out and get it and find it. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be a doctor. You just have to be someone who can sit with empathy and listen to someone without judging the position they're in.
That's our 25th wedding anniversary.
We want to empower people to ask for help, but we also want to make sure that we are reaching out ourselves. We're expressing concern. We're talking about the things we notice. Hey, I noticed that you usually stick around and chat at the farm when we've wrapped something up, but right now you're always in a rush to get out. Is everything okay? Just showing that genuine concern, that genuine care for someone, and more importantly than anything is just listening. When agriculture organizations like Farm Bureau use that leadership platform to advocate for mental health and to bring awareness and priority to mental health, it teaches farm and ranch families that it's okay to talk about tough things. They show you that your health is a priority to them, your wellness is a priority to them, that you as an individual and as a farmer are a priority to them. It's not just your farm, it's not just your equipment and all the other things that go along with the farm. It's you, and they want you to be well. It allows people, most importantly, to connect to resources that they might need. They allow us to bridge that gap between people who need some sort of help and finding, where that help is. All we have to do is make it okay to talk about stress, to talk about depression, to talk about some of these things that are tough to talk about right now.
If a friend is acting different than normal, I encourage you to see if you can lend them a hand, help them with a chore, or even just go on a drive to look at farm ground and fields. Make sure they're okay. Let them know that you're there for them. If you are down or depressed, I encourage you to ask for help. It's okay. We've been there before, and you're not alone. Let's end the stigma of mental health. We're all in this together.
Good evening, everybody. How are you guys doing tonight? You got myself. Had to adjust my camera a little bit. You got Brent Adams with us. Tonight, we're doing our show tonight on a very special subject, a dear subject to all of us. Mental health in the farms. we've had a lot of things happen in the last few weeks. I don't know if many of y'all have seen. There was a young lady that was in Australia that was a farm girl, Katie Lone, committed suicide. Had the best of the world, but it got to her. And we're here to talk a little bit about that tonight and go over it. We've got some very special guests with us. You're going to have myself, and you're going to have Brent Adams tonight. Brent, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Anytime we can get this subject front and center, I think it's really important, and I'm happy that we can get this get it out here. And we've got some guys with some great perspective on this, so looking forward to the dialogue tonight.
Oh, absolutely. And without further ado, we'll get started with this, because I think you guys just listen. And again, people, it's okay to not be okay. And as we go through this show, if anybody has anything, you can private message me or any one of the people involved in this show tonight, and we will always be glad to talk to you.
It's really surreal being here today, I'm not going to lie. This is a place where I could have been remembered for being dead and committing suicide.
Jeff Ditzenberger is a corn and soy farmer. His suicide attempt was 25 years ago.
I kind of had a sense of peace that I was just like, you know what, I'm not going to have to deal with any of the bullshit anymore. I'm not going to have to be a disappointment to everybody. I'm not going to be a burden to everybody anymore. And then I went into this abandoned house and I lit it on fire. And then the next thing I know, for whatever reason, I was like, why am I in this building? Why is this on fire? What's going on?
Jeff served time for arson, and he got help. He still farms in the same small Wisconsin town, but he's something of a local celebrity now because of his story and what he's doing with it. In 2015, he started a support group to break what he says is a stigma around farmers talking about mental illness.
Between what the prices are and some of the stress that goes along with just the daily grind, it kind of gets to a person after a while. You just wonder what you're doing wrong, why machinery's breaking down all the time. You're not doing your job to the best of your ability. And when things don't go right, it's catastrophic. You just get to the point where you'd even start asking people to tell them, I'm not having a really good day, things are not going good. And the problem is that, it was, suck it up, it'll be better tomorrow. Everything will be fine tomorrow. Suck it up, buttercup.
I hear that phrase a lot around here, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
For me, it eventually meant couple of shots of Jack in my coffee in the morning when I went to work, couple beers at lunch, get home, and it was nothing to go through, 12-pack of something or a bottle of something.
Good mental health care can be hard to get in places like this. According to a Ball State University study published in July, 95% of rural mental health professionals said they can't meet the needs in their communities.
And it was the same thing every time I called. Well, we can get you in a few weeks. I can't wait a few weeks. I need to get in now. And that's been one of the things that I would like to see, is I would like people to be able to talk to other people.
Well, as y'all can see, it's definitely an issue we all need to deal with. And I'll introduce our guest to us here with us tonight. First off, Jeff Ditzenberger. How are you doing, Jeff?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Not bad at all. Second of all, we'll add Matt Miles. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, guys.
Guys, Jeff, I know you and I have dealt quite a few times with different individuals, and it is a hard thing to deal with. Matt, and I understand you've had, Matt, you can kind of tell us a little bit about your side, and then we can all sit here and talk. And, a lot of people don't understand that we have a lot we go through each and every day, but the farm still goes on. Matt, I think you can lead into that quite a bit, can't you?
Yeah. Just to kind of give you a little background, and I'll be as brief as I can. My dad died when I was 32 years old, and I wasn't really prepared, to take over all the responsibility. So I hired a man that was my age. So it was 20 years ago, and his name was Billy Garner. And he started out as an employee, and then he became my best friend. And then basically we grew up together farming, and he had as many good ideas as I did. And it got to where, out of 30 days a month, we spent 27 of them together, with our wives, without our wives, just whatever we were doing. If we were hunting, we were farming, we thought alike. We almost were like, it was almost literally like twin brothers. And 2 years ago, this past Father's Day, we went out to check about a rain on some soybeans we planted behind wheat. And little did I know that at the end of that day, I was going to be the only one come out of that. Our wives were both with us, and we were on the side by side, and we were checking beans and went to the backfield, and I turned the side by side over, and it didn't end well for him. We could have recreated that accident 100,000 times, and it would have never come out the way it did. So, that was in June. So you can imagine being in the middle of a crop. We had about 10,000 acres in June in the middle of our crop, and having to deal with that was a little bit of an adversity for me. I'll be honest with you. It was about as low as I'd ever been in my life.
And it's been, you've been a few years before you've even been able to talk about it.
Yeah. That's what I was telling you today. I did on his year anniversary, I did a piece with Extreme Ag, and I thought it took a lot of different tries to make that work, to just hold myself together. And I did something the other day, talked about it some, and I thought I'm ready. I'm able now to be able to talk about it without completely breaking down. And without the help of my family and my son, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today.
Yeah, I understand that. Brent, this is a subject we've talked about for 2 years, and it's on all ends of the scale. Right. It's not just one thing. It's a lot of things. Jeff, you fought very hard. Tell us a little bit about the program you've created and what you guys are doing, Jeff.
So in 2015, I formed an organization called Tugs, and how I came up with that is that when I was in the military, we were on the second largest displacement ship next to an aircraft carrier, and in order for us to get safely into port or to get down, narrow waterways and stuff like that, we always had to call a tugboat. And the cool thing about a tugboat is you can't really see them next to our big ship, but you can hear his little toot and you can see a little bit of smoke coming out of the stack. I didn't get to do that because I was down in the engineering department, but so basically just before they pushed us into port, they would shut down the engines completely, and you just get this real sense of calm, and it's just like almost eerie, but it's calm. And when you feel a little bit of a bump and you kind of feel yourself move kind of smooth, and then you feel another little bump when you hit into the port there, and then somebody would come across a loudspeaker and say that we were safely in port and we could start unloading. And I gave that. I was telling that at a speech I gave, and all of a sudden it kind of hit me like life is like that. Like you can be the biggest ship around, biggest, toughest guy around or whatever, but sometimes big ships need little ships sometimes. So what my organization, what my goal in the vision that I have and the board has is to, one, to get rid of a lot of the stigmas that surround suicide and mental health. Two, to be a resource for people. I'm actually a certified mental health coach, and I'm also working on getting my peer specialist certification. And the only way you can be a peer specialist is if you actually have lived-in experience. And so we want to be, an advocate for those that can't speak for themselves. We want to, try to tell people that it's okay to not be okay. I mean, that's our tagline as well. It's on the back of my truck, and back of my hat, back of my bike. And try to, again, just get rid of a lot of those stigmas that surround mental health and suicide awareness.
And it does. It wears day to day. Life wears on us all. And without having somebody to talk to or somebody to go through, it just literally eats us down.
Yeah, and it's funny you should mention that. I just actually I was rushing to get here. Brandon knows why, but I just got done doing a 2-day at A&E Network has been following me around for the last 2 days with cameras and microphones and everything. And today when they were doing my interview, they kept talking about the drought that we've been facing. And, we got a little bit of some rain yesterday. And to rehash that over, like the angst that I've had with watching the crops not do as good as they should be. And, seeing some neighbors 3 miles away get rain and their crops look good. And I just I'm pretty sure I've lost my entire sweet corn crop. Even I had a bit of a breakdown today. And one of the things that we do at Tugs is we have, we try to get people in contact with other people that aren't necessarily a family member or aren't necessarily one of their best friends or anything, but somebody who would be, a little more open-minded or a little more blunt if need be. Sometimes I joke about the day I was complaining about my lunch to my one best friend who's my Tug, and he was like, "That's what you're complaining about? Why don't you make your own lunch instead of having your wife make it?" So but then when the guy that I farm with had a brain tumor and was rushed in for emergency surgery, like he listened to me sob for a half an hour. I couldn't get any words out, and that's one of the things that I think we need to look at. And ironically, the three groups that I think are affected the most with mental health challenges and getting to talk about them are farmers, veterans, and men. And ironically, the first three letters of mental health are men. I pointed that out to A&E today. I thought that was kind of ironic. But, I think we need to get away. I think we need to get away from the age-old adage of, suck it up, buttercup, or if you want something to cry, if you want something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about. We need to have candid conversations. We need to ask the questions. We need to, talk about these things as openly as we have COVID and cancer and all the other things that are out there that, affect our health physically and mentally. But we need to start having these open, candid conversations and, start helping people through some of these times of trial and tribulations.
Oh, I agree entirely.
I want to get back just really quickly to, talking about that stigma, because, there's some people that may have paid attention to this over the winter. The American Farm Bureau Federation had put out a survey with Morning Consult that showed that about half of rural adults think that people in their local communities attach at least a fair amount of stigma to mental health, and then about half attach at least a fair amount of stigma to going out and getting treatment for that. So, there's still plenty of work to be done, and I know guys like yourself are on the front lines of trying to do that. But how do we continue to just remove that stigma and let people know that it is okay?
Well, I think Brent. And we actually talked about this today. I actually had one of my therapist friends in here, and we were talking, about the therapy part of it. I had a friend reach out to me just a couple nights ago that wanted somebody to talk to her daughter, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And she goes, well, I can't get her in to see a shrink for at least 3 weeks. And I'm like, okay, first of all, we need to get rid of that whole shrink thing. All right, these are paid professionals or therapists or a person like myself who can't diagnose or anything but can help. Those of us that have been through it, like, we need to tell our stories. You talk about stigma, Brent. Let me tell you how bad the stigma was. I was a volunteer firefighter when I had my suicide attempt, and I was less embarrassed to be a volunteer firefighter who got a felony arson charge and went to jail for that, as opposed to admitting that I had been having, mental problems or that I had tried to die by suicide. We need to be open about it. If you've been to therapy and somebody is struggling, tell them what therapy is like. Like, I love going to therapy. I really do. My VA therapist and my one of my local therapists here, it's just a conversation. And it's somebody who's, it's somebody, the challenge within the agricultural community, like, it's all good and fine and dandy if I go over and I talk to Matt about what my crops are doing and Matt talks to me about what his crops are doing. But guess what? We're having the same issues, and we don't kind of like break away from that. Like, you don't have, and that's why I do what I do, is because I've had psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists that have reached out to me, and they're like, oh, so I just had a farmer in my office, and he was talking about, how he's only getting $12 a hundredweight for his milk, and I have no idea what he's talking about. Well, I can explain that to him, and I can give him, some tools to use, but, the one great thing about like being a peer specialist is that you have to have lived in experience. So my lived in experience is my suicide attempt and addiction to alcohol, a very bad addiction to alcohol. And so now when I have people approach me about their addiction, I can talk to them about their addiction. I can tell them that it's going to be okay, that you can be sober for 6 months and you might decide to just, and if you drink again, and you get off of that sobriety for it's, there's a song out there, it's called Accidents Happen. And that's basically what it talks about. Like, we're going to stumble. We are people, honestly, and I'm going to repeat myself probably 100 times tonight. We have to have these conversations. We have to ask people. I teach QPR, which is question, persuade, and refer. And what we call it is like CPR for mental health. But the first part of that is the Q, the question. Hey, Brent, how you feeling today? Oh, I'm feeling good. Good. Are you sure? Yep. Brent, Matt, how you feeling today? Dude, I'm not having the best day. You want to talk about it? Yeah, maybe not right now. Can we just I just want to sit here for a minute, or maybe it comes to the point where it's like, hey, Matt, like when someone's had the struggles that you've been going through lately and they feel like they do, you start thinking about suicide ideation. Are you thinking about suicide? Is this something on your mind? And if Matt says yes, I'm going to frankly say to him, hey, let's have a conversation. And the second part of that is the P, which is the persuade. You know what, Matt? I remember that day that you gave your niece that really cool doll that she wanted for her birthday, and she thought that was the greatest thing, and now you're her favorite uncle. She would be devastated if something happened to you, or there's, someone in the community that you gave a coffee cup to, or whatever the case may be. You find that reason for them to prove to them that they're valued, that they're appreciated. And then the refer part is to get them to the resource they need, whether that be a professional resource in the form of a psychologist or psychiatrist, therapist, maybe a clergy member. For kids, I have actually talked to, believe it or not, everybody, I have talked to kids at age 8 that have suicide ideation. And 2020 was brutal on all of us. And we forgot about the little ones. They were their lives were just as uprooted as what ours were, and we think, well, what can be so bad for a kid? Well, they're not seeing their friends. They're at home with mom and dad all the time now. Their school thing is different and stuff like that. So for a kid, maybe their favorite teacher or a coach or something like that is who they're going to want to talk to. But we need to, we're all farmers and we put things in toolboxes. We need to have a toolbox of resources that we can help people out, and we need to be willing to pull those wrenches out and tighten up the screws and tighten up the bolts and, get people back on that path to where they're it's just a bad day, not a bad life.
Yeah. No, I agree entirely. Now, Matt, I know when everything happened, tell us about how you had to deal with it. I know it was in the worst time of the year ever.
Well, and I just basically wanted to crawl in a hole. I mean, I basically wanted to just give up. And, just what he had said earlier, you start thinking about all the people that's depending on you and what would happen, if I did quit, what if I did just completely walk away from this thing? What would happen to the people that were involved? How many people would I hurt? And it's the same thing with suicide. If you start thinking about, if you can get that in a person's mind, how many people will you adversely affect besides yourself? I think that's pretty important. And, I had such I call it an army between my employees and my family and number one, my wife. I had such a good support system, and a good enough support system that I could take off for 2 weeks and just kind of get things back into perspective.
And it does. You sometimes you just have to kind of stop and listen. You ain't got to say anything. We just kind of got to stop and just say, okay, God, where are we going with this now? I had a period of time back a year or so ago, and the very first thing the doctor said when he came in, this was almost 2 years ago, was, have you got your will done, and can you make your preparations for your death? And I'm like, huh? And as many of y'all know, I've been sick for 2 years, and it was the hardest thing I've ever had. Was the doctor said, well, if your numbers don't change by a certain day, you're done.
Yeah.
And, you know, I let that eat me beyond belief. And unfortunately, way too many people let that happen. I talked to a farmer the other day, Matt, I think you saw where they lost their whole crop up there in North Dakota or Montana. They lost 6,000 acres of wheat in 35 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
They only farm 10,000. Well, they lost 3/4 of their crop. And they've been in a drought on top of that. I mean, it's all the little things. It's the tractor being stuck in the field that you're 30 miles away and got to go pull it out. You know, I mean, it happens. But, you know, it's a tough thing to deal with. Jeff and I have dealt with several late at night even. Jeff and I, the very first thing I'll do when somebody tells me I've got a problem is immediately message Jeff, hey, this is going on. We've got this happening. Help.
Well, and, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, Brandon, because, you know, all of us are obviously social media savvy because we're here, obviously, you know, and how often, you know, we scroll down through Facebook and you'll see, Matt made a good steak and we'll like that. And Brent got an award for something and we'll love that. And Brandon bought a new tractor and we'll be like, well, how the hell did you do that, Brandon? You know, so, but you go down and then you see someone who's like, I'm really having a bad day, or I'm so sick of things, or I'm fed up or something like that. And what do? Oops, kind of scroll by. You know, there's people, complete strangers that I've never met that I've become friends with, that when I see stuff like that, those are the ones I go into the private message box and be like, hey, Brent, you need to talk. Like, what's going on? Like, you know, and sometimes it might just be the fact that, like, the dog got out again and the neighbors complained about it and they're just, you know, fed up, but they're not in a bad state. But sometimes, you know, why we're so easily amused by everything else, and we'll have conversations about that. I mean, let's look at 2020 again. We fought about masks. We were passionate about masks, either to wear or not wear. We do the same thing with vaccine. And you can go up to somebody in a grocery store and you can have a conversation about that kind of stuff, or you can hear somebody cough or sneeze and be like, oh, have you got a cold? And you feel sympathy for them. And you might even still, at this point, you know, now they're kind of passing, you might still shake their hand or give them a hug or something like that. But if I say, hey, Brent, I've got PTSD and bipolar 2 and anxiety and borderline personality disorder, and I shake your hand, guess what, Brent? You ain't going to catch none of that. None of that's contagious. You know, and we shy away from that. Oh, no, I don't want to talk with the crazies. You know, and that's, you see it all over the place anymore. People will call people bipolar. People will call people crazy. People will call people psychotic and all this other kind of stuff. These are medical terms, folks, that people go through on an everyday basis. You know, my PTSD and my anxiety messes with me every single morning the minute I get up, you know, and I've got to make choices to get through that. You know, but at the end of the day, why can't we help each other out with that kind of stuff? If a farmer breaks a leg and can't get his crop done, 300 people will show up and take care of his crop. But yet, if a farmer were to cry in front of everybody, they'd be like, oh, what's wrong with Joe? Yeah, you must be, you know, suck it up, Buttercup. Oh, hope you have a better day tomorrow, Joe. You know, and that's one of the things, too, that is very frustrating in the mental health aspect of it, is that we now have what's called toxic positivity, where it's like Brent says, oh, Ditz, man, I'm having a really rough day today. Like my dog got hit in the road and I don't know if it's going to make it. Gee, that's too bad, Brent. But you know what? Somebody else's dog got hit yesterday and it died. So your day isn't really that bad. Somebody's got it worse than you. Man, screw that shit. Why can't we simply say, oh, Brent, man, I really dude, that sucks, man. What can I do for you? What can I do for you? You know, or tomorrow will be a better day. Do you know that? You can't predict the future. If you're telling people that, you might be giving them false hope. You know, it's just ridiculous. And it's a candid conversation. I'm going to say it again. It is a candid conversation. Let people have their bad moments. Let people have their bad days. Let people vent. Let people just sit next to them and let them do things on their own terms but just be there for a support system. And Matt, I commend you for taking time off to actually kind of like cope with the stuff that you were going, because that's one of the other challenges that faces rural America, is that we have crops to worry about. We have animals to worry about. You know, it's you know, right about the time you're ready to leave for church on a Sunday morning for a dairy farmer is when the freaking water cup breaks. You know, so you got to stay there. You got to stay there and do that. You don't have somebody that's going to come in and do it for you and stuff like that. I think it's very commendable, Matt, that you recognize that you needed time to process everything. Dude, that's huge. That's huge. Pat yourself on the back for it, because there's a lot of us that don't do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think it's interesting too, as I was going through some of those statistics today. You know, it said 87% of farmers and farm workers say it's important to reduce the stigma, but then you almost feel like on the other end of it, the same people are saying that are the same ones that are still kind of perpetuating that stigma. You know, so to kind of get past that, I mean, it's a pretty closed society, you know, when you look at it. So,
and you know, the signs are there. I mean, if somebody's, they're there very, very visibly. You just kind of got. I hit it at the same time you did, Brent. But Brent put this together earlier today, and it says it a lot. I mean, you look at when you change, you got to watch for people. They change their social activities. You know, it makes a big difference, and it is visible. Is it not, Jeff?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I spent, you know, my suicide attempt, I actually planned for about 6 weeks. There's a couple other things, Brent. That's a great visual, by the way. Thank you very much. That's pretty awesome. But there's some other things that we can add to that. Like if, you know, somebody gives away their prized possessions. You know, I went to my kid brother. I gave him all my little toy tractors. I had some guns that I gave away to some friends and stuff like that. And they're like, why are you doing this? I'm like, oh, you know, I just feeling kind of generous, you know, stuff like that. Change in religion. That's another big one. Like if people become either really super religious, or all of a sudden they were religious and like they've gone in the opposite direction. There's another warning sign. And the thing of it is even if it's not a warning sign that you're 100% sure about, hey, Brandon, is everything all right? You okay? Do you talk? Is there something going on? You know, there's no blame or shame in that. And I tell people all the time, and my thing was I didn't want to be a burden anymore. You know, you hear the B word a lot with people who are suicidal. I don't want to be a burden anymore. I don't want to be a burden anymore. And one of the things that I've gotten to tell people, and I tell this all the time, is that I would much rather take 4 hours or whatever out of my day to listen to the stuff you're going through and help you through it than to spend 15 minutes listening to your eulogy.
Absolutely.
I would much rather listen for 4 or 5 hours or 2 hours or whatever it is than to try to face your family and tell them I didn't do anything or know that I could have done something. You know, nobody wants to attend a funeral, and it's even worse when you're attending a funeral for someone that you could have potentially helped out. I've had friends that I've tried to help, and I have helped, and then the last moment when they should have reached out, they didn't do it, and I take it personal. Like it really messes with me. I just had a really close friend of mine that, you know, was starting to get back to being sober again, was really working on some things. Him and his wife were having some issues, but Father's Day shot himself. Tuesday after Father's Day was his birthday. I can't call him and sing him his happy birthday song like I do every year. And then at the end of the week, his daughter got elected as our county dairy princess, and he's not seeing that. You know, there's so much, and I think about it now. Like I think about, you know, if I'd have been dead, I'd have never had, or if I had succeeded at suicide, you know, I would have never had my kids. I wouldn't have this adorable 2-year-old grandbaby that I have now. I wouldn't be in this amazing relationship that I am with a young lady, with a lady, and have the relationship I have with her daughter. I wouldn't have met Brandon. I wouldn't have met Matt. I wouldn't have met Brent. I wouldn't have met. There's so much more. Like we need to remind people that you're having a bad day. You might even have a bad week, but you're still not having a bad life. It's something that we can get you through. And Matt made a point where he was like, you know, all these people that would be affected. And 2 years ago, I got a message from I don't know if you can read this or not, but I got a message from my little, who was 12 at the time, and she asked if on our shirts, if we ever put any quotes. And what's interesting is that she sent me this, and she thought it would be a really good thing to put on a shirt. And what it said is, suicide doesn't end depression, it passes it on to someone else. And I thought, you know what, that's pretty profound for a 12-year-old. If she can get it, why can't the rest of us?
Yep, absolutely. There's a farmer in Northwest Georgia that I know quite well. And, you know, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is the signs are there, just like in that graphic that Brent posted. His wife had been complaining of something for a year or more that I had heard, but nobody ever took it serious until she disappeared one day, drove to the backside of a field, put a gun in her mouth, and pulled the trigger. And it was a simple complaint. But and what I heard, and this is kind of, it really hit home to me, is somebody said, well, we didn't have a clue. And I looked and I said, wait a minute. She was doing this, this, and this. The signs were all there. But nobody asked.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Brandon, because in 2020, there was a nurse doctor that had contracted COVID. She was a frontline worker, contracted COVID, wanted to go back to work after she was cleared. She'd gotten over it and stuff, went back to work, and the hospital says, look, you still don't look quite 100%. Like, you're one of our main people. We need to have you at 100%. Take a couple more days and then come back and be ready to attack this thing head on. And went home and ended her life. She was living with 4 relatives, and every single one of them in the freaking interview said the same thing. We didn't know nothing was wrong. We didn't see anything. We didn't know nothing was wrong. You know, part of our problem right here, we spend more time looking at these things than paying attention to what's going on. We've got into a society where we send text messages. You know, have a phone call. Even your best friend. Even if you text your best friend every day, call them once in a while and be like, hey, Brent, how's it going? And maybe Brent will be like, oh, dude, everything's great. I'm having a good time. Or it might be like, I don't know, dude, like things are like you can hear those voice inflections and you can pick up on some of that other stuff. And honest to God, ladies and gentlemen, we need to quit burying our heads in the sand. We have got to quit burying our heads in the sand. We have got to tell our children, hey, we need to sit down and have a family conversation. We need to see where everybody's at. Put your phones away. You know, parents out there, I had a mother that reached out to me here a little while ago, and she had, you know, and I could sense something when we were talking that something wasn't right because we talk quite a bit. And I'm like, so, hey, Jody, that's not a real name. Hey, Jody, what's going on? And she's like, how do you know there's something going on? I'm like, well, I can kind of pick up something on your text. And she goes, oh, I'm having a really, really bad day, but I'm trying to keep it together for the kids. Why the hell are we trying to keep it together for the kids? Why are we not telling the kids, hey, mom's having a bad day, dad's having a bad day? Because you're going to do a couple things. One, you're going to show them your vulnerability, and they're going to start to notice it more often. I also tell parents to have a safe word, for lack of a better term, have a safe word. If you're having a rough day and the kids are being obnoxious in the house or something and they need to get away from you for 15 minutes, say something simple like hippopotamus or potato or whatever the case may be. The other thing that you do is that then it teaches them that it's okay for them to not be okay, and then that they can approach you for what they want to talk about. And then the other thing that it does is that actually when they grow up and they get out into relationships and stuff like that, they'll have candid conversations with their significant other, with their families and stuff like that. Everything, you know, in QPR, one of the things we talk about, and as farmers, we embrace this every single year. Plant a seed. If you plant a seed, you offer hope. Hope will save lives. We do this all the time. You know what we need to start doing, though, is we need to start harvesting some people in, and we need to start helping them out. When they get into that drought, when they're in that drought themselves, we need to water that. We need to fertilize that. We need to have acceptance for what they're going through and what they're struggling through. And honestly, for me, it's kind of interesting because sometimes when I help a friend out, like then it makes my stuff not seem quite as bad, and I actually feel better about it too. And now we've just had 2 people that have had a better day.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Matt, a few weeks ago, we were talking, and it was just absolutely gut-wrenching that night we did the live. and we were looking at pictures of your cornfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people don't understand there's a lot of things. Not only are you taking that blow, but like in your case, your son is, Lane. They are, our kids, our farm kids see stress more than any other children in the world. I mean, they're in the field. They see their father stressing. They see when they take in, when it's cost you $5 a bushel, or it's cost you $5 an acre to farm because the price wasn't right. And kids do see that. Kids watch that. That's something we have to keep in mind. Like you said, Jeff, the kids are in it too. And they need to know that it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went for a long time, in different situations like that where I would do like what Jeff was talking about. Just, I'm raising my son. I need to raise him to be tough. He don't need to know, he don't need to know those things. And as I've gotten older and he's gotten older, he started to see some of the stresses in the farm. And, I've tried to kind of be more open about, and not hide that from the kids type situation. And if people don't know, that's like I tell my guys all the time, I can't change if I don't know. I can't change what I'm doing. If I'm offending you, I can't change that if I don't know that I'm doing that. And it's the same way with mental health. If people don't know, it's just going to ball up inside of you and make it worse on you. And then there's no way you can get help if you don't let anybody know.
And you're absolutely right. I just Colin Newland just posted this, and he's right. How many times have we done this right here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Matt, I know you've done it just like I have and just like Jeff has. It goes bad. We just take it, we stick it, we put it over here. It's not going to bother us later. Well, yeah, it is. You lay away at 2 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and say, that pump went out. I got a $27,000 pump. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a scene. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I just said, you've got to face it. You may face it that day, or you may face it 2 weeks later, or you may face it, in a bad situation, but you're going to face it one way or another. You've got to deal with it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and the other part of that is that, we have a tendency to understand that it has to be taken care of at some point in time. But in the military, we used to have a saying called "embrace the suck." And what "embrace the suck" is like you dealt with it now, like you took it on and you dealt with it now. Yeah, is it going to be there tomorrow? It can be, but instead of taking it in and like Colin said, compartmentalizing it. That's a big word, Colin. You need to come up with a better word. But anyways, taking that in and doing that, that's like around here. It's a little bit different because like my neighbor, who's actually now the guy that I farm with, when I was married to my ex-wife, who's now my neighbor, follow that one. Like if we had trouble with a piece of equipment, we'd call over and he'd come over and help us. And now it's kind of ironic, my ex-wife calls me and she's like, I can't fix this tractor. And I'm like, I'll be over in a minute, and she obviously misses me. She remarried a guy named Jeff. That's my first name. So obviously she misses me, but whatever, that's beside the point. But the whole thing of it is that, we compartmentalize not only the stuff on our farms, but we compartmentalize the stuff that we're thinking about. Instead of getting it out, if you're, there's something to be said. Like if Brent's my employee and I'm mad at him, I shouldn't deal with that right at the moment. Now, if Brent's doing something that's not safe, and be like, Brent, don't do that, whatever. But later, with a little bit more prevailing head, come back to Brent and say, hey, Brent, like you did something earlier today that, I didn't really approve of. I didn't really like it. Can we talk about it? And don't be defensive. Take that in because you're in. It's interesting because you'll start to see, especially for those of you that have employees, when you start having those conversations, you'll be surprised how much your employees will open up to you. You'll be surprised how much more productive your employees will be. You'll be surprised how much more productive you'll be because everybody's on the same page. And if you have something in place for your family even that says, hey, if we're having a bad day, let everybody know you're having a bad day. Let us know what we need to do to take care of it. If we need to leave you alone for a little bit, but let's come back and talk about this later. I've coined a new phrase this year, and that phrase is, it's time for the shit to quit being swept under the rug. It's time to make people uncomfortable. And that's what these conversations do. They will make people uncomfortable, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's exactly what we need to do. We need to get people to where they'll open up. We'll get people where they're uncomfortable enough that they want to learn more. We'll get people uncomfortable to where they're not going to allow people to be treated badly or to deal with their challenges on their own. And that's what has to happen. These conversations have to happen. But what's more uncomfortable? Talking to someone right now and finding out if they're having a bad day, or going into a funeral home and talking to their family, knowing that you could have done something.
Now, I'll tell you something that when I was going through all I was going through 2 years ago, I went to a counselor. And I'm going to tell you, it was an eye-opening experience. And I walked in there, and she said, this is what I want you to do. I want every day from now on, at least for the next month, I want you to write down everything that you think about during the day. Put it in a journal. And when we got done, after 30 days reading that journal, it's amazing the things and the way I was handling stuff compared to the way I do now. A lot of times you don't think about things. You really don't think about them. Like he said, you just compartmentalize. But you do. You go in there, and unless the little square box. But unless you literally write down and see your own life on paper, you don't really think about it. You just know it's eating you. It's eating you. And then you start looking, well, this right here is a problem because 3 days in a row, this is what happened. And I had never done that before. And I still have the notebook, and I keep it hidden. Because, you see a lot of things when you write it down.
Jeff, I want to go back to this idea that you had talked about earlier about having to wait, because, if I need to go to the hospital, if I'm having a heart attack, or if I'm having a stroke, or even going back and having COVID, I wasn't going to wait 6 weeks to get help, so I know you're plugged into the mental health community. What kind of feedback are you getting there? I mean, are people open to creating new avenues for people to get that help quicker, or what can be done there?
Well, there's been some challenges, obviously, with COVID. A lot of these therapy sessions and counseling sessions and stuff were done virtual. And they're not to me, Brent, they're not as effective. I actually did a mock one with a therapist friend of mine just to see what it was like. And it's like, okay, can somebody hear me around? I'm in my office right now and there's apartments behind here. I've got great Wi-Fi here, so that's part of the reason I'm here. But, it's like, okay, there's that part of it. There's the issue with the number of people that are actually doing this now. I mean, it's a rough field to get into. Which is part of the reason why I became a life coach and then doing the stuff that I'm doing, because it's nothing for me to talk to, 10, 12 people a day. Now, not everybody's in a crisis situation. I don't want you to think that, some of them are just like, hey, tell me something good, or I need a minute, Ditz. I just need to run something past you. I'm just not feeling the greatest, whatever. And that's why, what my organization's ideology and mission is so important, Brent, is because we're trying to connect people with average, ordinary, everyday people. The National Suicide Hotline, that's something that, ran across the screen there or whatever. And I even had somebody one time that was like, I don't want to call them because they're going to come take me away with the men with the little white hug me coats. There's another stigma. No, they're not. They're just trained volunteers that are going to talk you through your stuff. They're not going to come and take your guns. They're not going to haul you away. If it's a really bad situation, they may try to find out where you're at and call 911 and have somebody do a welfare. I've done that. I've been on conversations where I've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, this is way more serious than what they're even letting on. And I tell you what, I've had friends get pissed at me because I've dialed 911, and it's like, dude, you'll get over it. You'll be happy. A few months down the road, you'll come back and thank me. And 9 times out of 10, they do. So it's still a challenge, Brent, to get into that professional side. Rural America is struggling big time because we do not have the resources. I was fortunate enough to work with one of our congresswomen to actually get some of the farm bill to set aside some money for mental health in Wisconsin. And so what they did is they actually have vouchers where a farmer can get a voucher to go see a mental health specialist. We also have the Wisconsin Farm Center, which is now manned 24 hours a day with a licensed therapist. And anybody, a farmer can call and talk about what's going on with them and stuff like that. This is what we need to do. We need to expand. We need to get more information out there. We need to get guys like you and Brandon and even Matt. Matt's been through a very traumatic thing. And I have a neighbor not too far away that had the same thing happen to his young son, but Matt gets it. Like, Matt understands what that bad day is like. He understands that, it's an accident. Like, it is what it is. However, suicide is the number one preventable death in the entire world. How do we do that? We've talked about it already a couple times tonight. Ask the questions, have the conversation. I know it kind of went a little bit around what you were asking, Brent, but that's what they're seeing. I'm getting referrals all the time because sometimes people don't need a therapist; they just need someone to talk to, and that's where I come in as a mental health coach. We're not going to talk about your childhood. We're not going to talk about your all this other stuff. We're just going to talk about the here and now and what do you need to do to get through it. That's what we're going to do. We all have the tools to do this. We just need to take the initiative and the time and pull the damn tractor or the toolbox out of the shed and start doing some repairs in the field.
Yeah. And that's why I think this is important. I mean, sitting here listening to all this education, I think is key because, looking at some more of these stats, the number one barrier, they say cost. 73% of people say they don't seek treatment because of cost. 63% availability, 63% accessibility, 60% stigma, and 59% embarrassment. But if you put all that together, if you start out with that education, you kind of wipe some of those other preconceived notions aside, and that's just what they are, Well,
now, one thing that I heard Jeff say a while ago, it's something I thought about. If your friend gets mad because you call to have them checked on, but they're still alive to be mad at you, oh, well, at least you're alive.
Right.
You can be mad.
My ex-wife was mad at me all the time, and she'd still stick around. So,
She didn't go far anyway.
And I think too, the other thing, and Brent, I'm gonna go back to you here. I'm a huge Vic Firth 5B drumstick guy. What's kind of ironic about this is like we need to find things to have released during the day. So I don't live with my mother anymore. I haven't for a long time, but this will make the story a little more fun. When I was in high school, I wanted to play the drums, and my mom is like, absolutely not. And I was like, but that's what I want to do. And she's like, no, find something less obnoxious. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to play the saxophone. Well, I couldn't play the saxophone because we had too many saxophone players. So I ended up playing the cornet, which is kind of like the trumpet. Talk about annoying. I mean, it's almost like right up there with the recorder that they gave us in middle school and grade school. So anyways, here, 6 months ago, I'm a huge music fan. I have a mental health playlist that's by songs by Citizen Soldier and Breaking Benjamin and some of these other bands that talk about mental health and the challenges that go along with it. One of my favorites is Godsmack, and Godsmack did this video with a bunch of kids called Unforgettable. And Unforgettable has 30 drums in the auditorium when they do this. So I was going up to a VA appointment, and I decided that I was going to buy a set of drums, and I did. I bought electric ones for now. I'm in the process now of buying an acoustic set as well. But I can sit on those, and I'm not that good at it yet. I'm actually taking lessons from a guy who was the drummer for the Georgia Satellites. If you don't know who the Georgia Satellites are, we probably can't be friends, or you're just too young. But anyways, Google it later. But anyways, he's a neighbor of mine. He lives down the road about 14 miles, and I'm taking lessons from him. But that is sometimes my sanctuary. Like I take my little earbud things that sit on the outside of my ears, and then I take my headphones like what Matt's wearing, which I'm kind of jealous of that. I didn't think about bringing those in with me. And I will sit there and I will just freaking do whatever on the drums, and I feel so much better. Or I get on my motorcycle and I go for a motorcycle ride, or I bought a camper last year and I haven't gotten to use it much because now everybody's bought a camper and everybody's going camping. But like I set it up in my yard, and my little comes over and we have a little camping thing out front, stuff like. We have to find those things that make us happy, that we can get away from the farm for a minute. Because honestly, the farm is still good. It doesn't matter if you take an hour off, the farm is still going to be there in an hour. But we don't have that mentality. It's been ingrained in us that we have to grind and grind and grind and grind and grind. Bullshit. We need to align. We need to align. If you can align, the grinding becomes easy.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
100%.
Matt, I know you've had a rough year, but you guys are actually looking a little bit better now, aren't you?
Yeah, things are looking better. We've got during all that weather, we had bad pollination on some of our corn, but our other crops are looking really good. We've come out of this thing a lot better. For the most part, there's still a lot of farmers who lost a lot of acres, that's probably going to have trouble, recovering from some of that. We were very blessed to be on the edge of that, on the south edge of that really heavy rain. So things are looking pretty good. Yeah, we're pretty excited about what we have left.
That's a good thing. Well, guys, it's been a great time tonight. We've gotten a lot of information out. And again, people, it's okay to not be okay. It really is. If you have a problem, don't ever hesitate. I answer my phone 24 hours a day, which I kind of get in trouble because I send other people emails and messages at 2 a.m. But don't ever hesitate. One of us will always take your call and do our best to help you. That's just, we're all a family. It doesn't matter if you're farming in Weiner, Arkansas, or Pine Grove, Alabama, or you're up in Richland Center, Wisconsin. We're all family. We're all connected. And that's the one thing. Farming may be the largest dysfunctional family ever, but we're family. And that's one thing people have to understand. Now, Brent, what have you got going the rest of this week?
Man, it's a busy week here. Getting ready to close up another show here. That'll drop on Friday. That'll be episode 3 of the Inside Farm Life podcast now. So we've got those up and going. Adam Reed, who's the vice president of sales and marketing for Versatile, is going to be along to talk about some new high horsepower tractors that they're getting ready to introduce here and take orders for this fall. And I guess you can see them at the Farm Progress show coming up in late August. So we talk a bit about that. And then we're putting the Brazilian corn market under the microscope this week on Market Talk with Jesse Allen here. So we're kind of taking a look at that, and also a little bit of livestock talk in there, and then talking heat soak with our buddy, the hot rod farmer, Ray Bohax, on Bushels and Cents. And then we're going to hear the music of Kirsty Krause on there, and a lot going on. We've got a couple live streams coming up. Live stream tomorrow at 1 p.m. with Rob LaRue, who's the president of the National Farmers Union. He's going to join us tomorrow. And then on next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, Zippy Duval, who's the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation, is going to be along. And we're going to talk a little bit about both those organizations, what their key legislative priorities are for the rest of 2021 and beyond. And I know with President Duval, he's been traveling the country a lot, really. I've seen him out in the West Coast. I've seen him in Florida. He's been everywhere, logging a lot of miles here lately. So we're going to talk a bit about what he's hearing from farmers and ranchers out there on the trail, and what they're sharing with him, and their hopes and their struggles and so forth. And we'll kind of unpack all that stuff next week. And then we'll repurpose some of that for the radio show and podcasts coming up here. So a lot going on there. I was in Nashville earlier this week. We're tying up some loose ends to get going on some more tapings for country music stuff too. So we've got a lot a great artist waiting in the wings to put some of that stuff out there that we'll put on the podcast and radio, and also on Farm Life Radio here, which we're going to really be ramping up here over the next few weeks. So a lot going on right now.
And you'll be able to listen to Farm Life Radio on Bluetooth. You can put it in your tractor. You can put it in your truck. And Jeff, it has the music you like. Georgia satellites are on there, along with Mel McDaniel, a lot of George Jones, Charlie Daniels. We got some good stuff.
I don't know. Is Brent one of the celebrity voices on there? Because he's just got that calming voice. Like, I think I could fall asleep to his voice. It's so relaxing. So, like, I don't know if I want to be. I don't have all that real fancy GPS stuff on my equipment, so I don't want to like take out some trees or whatever. But that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, we'll try not to put you to sleep too much with it.
Yeah, we actually have it timed during the day. We have pretty active music during the day, and nighttime it kind of mellows out a little bit, but we do. Now, everybody, we're gonna put up as we leave the show tonight what Matt Miles posted today, and I'll post it on Farm Life here in a little while. If you get a chance, read this, because Matt, you know what? That says it all right there. That absolutely says it all. And for myself, Brent Adams, Jeff Ditzenberger, Matt Miles, we're glad you guys joined us tonight. And join us next week, and we'll have another episode of Farm Life Live. We're glad you guys joined us, and come back to see us. See y'all.
Good night, everybody.